My name is Clara Reeves, and I'm going to tell you the story of how my life was divided into two parts. Before and after. Before everything collapsed, before I understood that there are deals in the world that no one should ever make, even when the alternative is losing the one thing you love the most. I'm telling you this now because no one who reads this story should ever do what I did. But let me start from the beginning, at the point where there was still hope. It was a Tuesday in September when I signed the papers for the house. The realtor, a middle-aged woman with a very bright smile and eyes that rarely blinked, handed me the keys and said something I should have paid attention to at the time. It's been on the market for quite a while. Most families don't stay long. I was 37, divorced for 2 years, and my daughter, Emily, with her sweet and shy 8 years, needed stability. The apartment we were renting in Portland was too cramped, too dark, and I was working 2 temporary jobs to pay that rent, which consumed half my salary. When I saw the ad for the isolated house on the outskirts of Salem, Oregon, with that absurdly low price and 2 acres of land, something inside me broke with hope. A new beginning, I whispered to Emily when we first viewed the property. Just the 2 of us. We can do this. The house was light wood, with large windows and a roof that needed repair, but it had that quality real estate agents call potential. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen with 1970s tiles, and a porch that looked out onto a vast garden stretching to a line of black pines. That garden was the reason I bought it. Emily was an apartment kid. She needed space, air, freedom to run and shout without neighbors pounding on the door complaining. When I saw her open the back door of the house and walk down the wooden steps into the green world before her, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. "Mom," she whispered, her small hands white as porcelain. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." In those first few days in the house, everything was magic. I remember this with a cutting clarity, because those moments became a nauseating contrast to what would come later. Emily explored the garden, finding wild flowers, showing me interesting leaves. I planted things. I bought an old bicycle at a yard sale for her to practice on the driveway. At night, we sat on the porch with hot tea, and she told me about the things she had seen during the day. "There's a fallen birdhouse near the fence," she told me one night, her face lit only by the kitchen lights inside. "I think a bird is living there now, a bird that lost its home." These things, she said, filled me with hope. My heart raced. I had given my daughter something that money could buy, but that was worth more than money. Space to breathe, security, the feeling that we had made it. It was 3 weeks before the strangeness began. 3 weeks of near happiness, which, thinking about it now, is probably how long that thing needed to get used to the house. To feel our warmth. To open its yellow eyes and decide that we would be sufficient. It happened on a Thursday in autumn. Emily had spent the afternoon playing alone in the garden while I organized the kitchen, trying to make the house feel less temporary. When she came in for dinner, still dirty and breathing heavily, there was a shift in the air that I couldn't identify. "Did you have fun?" I asked, placing a plate of macaroni and cheese in front of her. She nodded, but she was quiet, quieter than usual. Her eyes, which are the color of honey when the light hits them just right, seemed unfocused on anything particular. She just ate mechanically as if programmed to perform that function. "Did you make any new friends in the garden?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation going as any mother would. That's when she said it, casually, between one forkful of mac and cheese and the next. "Yes, my new friend is called Annie." I was drinking water when she spoke. I froze. "Oh, really?" I asked, feigning casualness. My training as a mother had taught me that children have imaginary friends. It was normal. It was healthy. It was a way to process the world, to deal with transition. "Annie, that's nice. Are you having fun?" "A lot," Emily replied, turning back to her plate. "She knows everything about the house. She used to live here." My stomach did a little flip. Not enough to completely alarm me, but enough to register. I filed that information in my brain under normal things about 8-year-olds in new houses. The nights began to change. I would put Emily to bed around 8:30. I'd read her stories, sing a quiet lullaby that I learned from my mother, and wait until her breathing became deep and regular. Then I would go downstairs, turn on the television at a low volume, and try to have a few minutes of adult time alone before going to sleep myself. But about 2 weeks after that first sighting of Annie, I started hearing things. Whispers coming from upstairs, from Emily's room. They were too soft to be alarming, and there was something comforting about them. It sounded like Emily murmuring, as if she were playing or telling stories to herself. Kids do that, I thought. They talk to imaginary friends. They create narratives. They process the day. But then, on a Sunday night, I was picking up the dirty laundry from Emily's bedroom floor when I noticed something that made my heart pound. Her dolls. Emily had 7 dolls. A faded teddy bear she'd had since before she was born, a blonde Barbie from a past birthday, a cloth doll her grandmother had made, 2 small stuffed animals, and 2 other action figures she had won at a children's party. Normally, these dolls were scattered across the bed and floor, carelessly, as any child would leave toys. But that night, they were arranged in a perfect circle on the floor near the bed. A circle so geometrically exact that it looked like it had been measured. All the dolls were turned toward the center of the circle, their small plastic faces pointing to an empty spot in the middle. Did I do this? Did Emily do it? Or had someone else? Emily? I called, and my voice came out tenser than I intended. Come here. She appeared at the doorway in her pink pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Why are your dolls like this? I asked, pointing to the circle. She looked at the dolls as if seeing them for the first time. Annie did it, she answered without emotion. Annie did this? I repeated. She said they needed to be in a circle, to guard the special place. What special place, Emily? But she just shrugged and turned to go back to bed, as if the conversation was over. As if she hadn't just answered a question that had raised a dozen other questions in my mind. That night, I picked up the dolls and put them back in place, scattered naturally on the floor. Before going to sleep, I checked the whole house twice. Locked doors, locked windows, everything normal, everything safe. But there was something that had entered the house. It wasn't fear yet. It was just a feeling that something was out of place. Like when you enter a room and feel that someone has moved your things, but you can't identify exactly what was moved. It got worse the following week. I woke up one morning with the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't a specific noise, it was more a pressure in the air, like when a thunderstorm is coming and you can feel the electricity before the rain. I checked my clock in the dark. 3:33 a.m. There's something about that specific time that is disturbing. Isn't there? 3:33. As if the universe had stepped on a broken pattern. I got out of bed and walked down the dark hallway. I passed the bathroom, past the walls that no one had painted yet and which still had the faded wallpaper of the previous era. I reached Emily's bedroom door. It was empty. The bed was untouched, the blanket still arranged the way I had left it. My heart started beating faster. I checked the bathroom. Empty. I ran downstairs, my bare feet slapping against the cold wooden floor. That's when I saw her. Emily was in the backyard, visible through the kitchen's glass door. She was walking in circles around the empty pool. Yes, there was a pool. I had forgotten to mention it. When I first entered the house, I hadn't even fully noticed it. It was as if my brain had rejected it. As if that cracked concrete structure covered in dry leaves and moss was an element that didn't fit into the new beginning narrative. The pool was only a dozen yards beyond the main garden, on the other side of a wooden fence that had fallen in several places. It was enormous, maybe 15 by 25 feet, with a deeply cracked floor in a pattern of spiderwebs that branched out from the center. At the bottom, there was a layer of leaves, accumulated mud, and things I wasn't sure how to classify. Dead algae. Animal bones, maybe. The smell was indescribable, a combination of decomposition and earth that had long been deprived of light. I had never been into that pool. I had always postponed it. There was always a reason to leave it for later. Now, seeing my daughter walk in circles around it, under the glare of a moon that illuminated her pale body in an almost spectral tone, all my patience and rationality collapsed. I ran out the kitchen door, turned around the fallen fence, and grabbed her. Emily, I shouted, holding her by the shoulders. What are you doing? How did you get out of bed? "Are you sleepwalking?" She turned to me, and in that moonlight, I saw something that chilled me. Her eyes weren't focused on me. They were looking beyond, at the empty pool behind me. It was like looking at a porcelain doll. There was expression on the face, but no consciousness behind it. "Emily?" I whispered. After a moment, she blinked. Her expression changed. Suddenly, she seemed to be there, really there, recognizing me. "Mom?" Her voice was small and confused. "Why are we out here? It's cold." I carried her back to the house, holding her against my chest, feeling her small body tremble against mine. She had been walking barefoot on the cold grass, and her feet were damp with dew. We warmed her up. I put her back to bed, and that night I didn't sleep. I heard her wake up several times, her feet softly hitting the floor, opening the bedroom door, closing the bedroom door. But I didn't leave my room to check. Something in me didn't want to know. Something in me just wanted to stay under the covers and pretend that my daughter wasn't performing some kind of hypnotizing ritual near an empty pool in the middle of the night. The bruises began to appear a week later. I first noticed them when she was taking a bath. Small purple marks, the size of fingers, spread across her shoulders like a necklace of contusions. My whole body froze. "Emily, what is this?" I asked, trying to stay calm, trying not to sound alarmed, even though I was. She looked at the bruises with an expression of genuine confusion. "I don't know," she replied. "It just appeared." "Did you fall? Did you hurt yourself somewhere?" "No, Mom. I swear." The bruises worsened in the following days. Not just on her shoulders, but on her arms, on her neck, on her small chest where her pajamas opened. They all had the same distinct mark. Fingers. As if someone was repeatedly squeezing her, leaving their handprints on her body. I took her to a doctor. Dr. Mitchell was a 60-year-old man with a gray beard and glasses perched on the tip of his nose. He examined Emily meticulously, gently touching the bruises, asking questions about her medical history, about recent falls, about any physical trauma. "When did you first notice this?" he asked me. "About a week ago." "And you don't know how it happened?" She says she doesn't, and I believe her. He leaned back in his chair, the pen in his hands. "Well, these bruises are consistent with impact contusion. The distribution, however," he hesitated, "is unusual. They look almost symmetrical, as if someone had squeezed." I finished. "Yes, squeezed, with significant force." "Do you think I did this?" I asked, my voice rising an octave. "Do you think I'm an abusive mother?" "I'm not saying that. I'm just observing." He turned to Emily with a comforting smile. "Are you okay, honey? Are you safe at home?" "Yes," Emily replied in a low voice. "Is someone hurting you? Is someone doing you harm?" She shook her head, but there was something in her face that wasn't entirely convincing. It was as if a part of her knew something she couldn't express. Dr. Mitchell stood up and led me out of the office. I lowered my voice when I spoke. "So what is it? What's the cause?" "It could be several things. An allergic reaction, an infection, a skin disease that I don't recognize. It could be psychosomatic, the body manifesting emotional distress through physical marks. My daughter is not distressed. Her life is stable. We're starting from scratch, yes, but it's a positive new beginning." "Sometimes," he said, "children process change in ways we don't fully understand. I'll refer her to a dermatologist. Do you want to do some blood tests too? Just to rule out immune deficiencies?" I agreed. The tests came back normal. The dermatologist, a wrinkled woman named Dr. Chan, suggested vitamins, an improved diet, and monitoring the situation, as if I could somehow monitor the way my daughter was being marked by something invisible. But the marks didn't stop. With each passing day, there were more. Not just contusions now, but small cuts, as if something with fingernails had torn her skin. Her eyes started to have deep dark circles. She ate less, played less. She spent hours in her room, in silence, in whispered conversations that ceased when I opened the door. And she kept waking up at 3:33 a.m. and walking to the empty pool. I started locking her door at night, just for a while, just while we tried to figure out what was happening. The first night, I heard her pulling the doorknob for hours. The second night, the noise was of fingernails scratching the wood. The third night, it was silent, but there was a strange odor coming from under the door, like something putrid, like dead fish. I opened the door that morning and there was nothing, no evidence of the smell. Just Emily, in bed, sleeping deeply with new marks on her neck. I was starting to collapse. I could feel it. It was like feeling that you are in a boat that is slowly filling with water, and you can't find where the leak is. At a certain point, you stop looking and just try not to drown. The school noticed it before anyone officially said anything to me. I received a call on a gray October day from Ms. Patterson, the principal of Lincoln Elementary School. She maintained a careful, professional voice that indicated she was in "we have a problem" mode. "Mrs. Reeves, I'd like you to come to the school for a conversation. It has to do with Emily." "What happened? Is she okay?" My heart raced. "She's fine, but there are some issues we need to discuss." When I arrived at the school, Miss Patterson was waiting for me in her office. There was also a woman she introduced as the school counselor, Ms. Valdez. The tone of this meeting was different. It was like being in a white square with two jurors waiting to condemn me. "Emily has been behaving strangely in class," Miss Patterson began. "She seems tired all the time. She's having trouble concentrating. And there are moments when she seems disconnected. She has trouble sleeping," I admitted. "She's been having nightmares." "Nightmares about what?" asked Ms. Valdez. "She doesn't want to talk about it." "Mrs. Reeves," Miss Patterson placed a paper on the table. "Emily did this in art class. It was a drawing of a faceless figure, with yellow eyes and long black hair that spread out like tentacles. The figure was hanging over a small child that I immediately recognized as Emily, based on the drawing of her face. The figure's hair wrapped around the child's body like chains. "She draws frequently," Ms. Valdez continued. "When she wants to. It's not an assignment. It's what she chooses to create." I wanted to vomit. "And there's this." Ms. Patterson opened an attendance logbook. "Emily was found sleeping in a supply closet last weekend. When we asked why she was there, she said she was hiding from the thing." "What thing?" No one answered. "Mrs. Reeves," Ms. Valdez said with a voice that tried to be compassionate but was fundamentally accusatory, "we have to follow an investigation protocol. The marks on her body, the behavior, the content of her drawings and writings. All of this raises concerns." "What kind of concerns?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "Abuse, trauma, anything that could explain why a child is at such a level of psychological stress." "I am not abusing my daughter," I said, my voice quiet but every fiber of my body vibrating. "We are not saying you are, but we need to report this to Child Protective Services. It's protocol." The meeting continued for another half hour, but I didn't absorb much. The feeling was of being in a dream where you scream but no sound comes out. My life was disintegrating while the two women in front of me carefully documented it, clicking pens and writing down everything I said. What followed was administrative hell. A social worker named Margaret, a short-haired woman with a clipboard, visited my house 3 days later. She looked around as if cataloging items for an estate sale, looked in all the closets, inspected Emily's room, asked Emily questions about our life as if interviewing her for a game where the correct answers meant she wouldn't be removed from me. "Has Mom ever hit you?" Margaret asked. Emily shook her head. "Has Mom ever shouted at you a lot?" "Sometimes," Emily answered, and that single word was like a knife in my chest. "Do you feel safe at home?" Emily looked at me, her eyes small and sad. "I think so," she said. But there was a hesitation that Margaret recorded on her clipboard as if it were evidence of my guilt. Margaret sent in her reports. An investigation was opened. A second social worker came, then a third. Each one brought their own suspicions, their own interpretations of information that couldn't be interpreted the way they were interpreting it. "Do the marks continue to appear?" they asked. "Yes." "And you still can't explain why?" "No." "Have you taken her to a doctor?" 3. They don't know what it is. But they keep appearing? Yes. That is suspicious, Mrs. Reeves. Logic says that if a child is being abused and the abuser is being investigated, the abuse should stop. But with your daughter, it's getting worse. I wish I had laughed then. I wish I had been strong enough to explain to them that there was a thing in my house that wasn't human, that wasn't afraid of social investigations, that didn't care about governmental protocols. But instead, I just looked at my hands. During the investigation procedures, Emily was temporarily placed with my mother in Portland for her safety. 6 days without my daughter. 6 days while the investigation proceeded, while they interviewed my neighbors, my friends, my doctors. Finding out that there were no signs of material neglect. Finding out that my bank records showed a mother trying to build a stable life. Finding out that I was literally the least suspicious person they had ever investigated. Because there were no signs of violence in my house beyond the marks on my daughter's body that no one could explain. When Emily was returned to me, she was cold to me for the first time in her life. My sweet, loving daughter, who used to run into my arms when I came home from work, simply walked into the house behind Margaret as if she were a prisoner being escorted back to her cell. The investigators have determined there is no evidence of physical abuse or neglect. Margaret informed me on the porch, reading from her report as if delivering a sentence that wasn't entirely satisfactory. However, we will continue to monitor the situation. Any further sign of concern, and she will be removed from your care again. I understand, I said. You both, Margaret looked at me then at Emily, would probably benefit from therapy. Any trauma from the separation. But she was talking to the air. I was already a ghost at that point, drained of humanity by a system that was trying to protect someone from an abuser who wasn't human. The night Emily returned, I found her at the pool again. This time, I didn't try to be rational. I didn't try to retrieve her and take her back to bed. I just watched from a second-floor window, seeing my daughter in a white nightgown, walking in increasingly larger spirals around that empty, rotten structure. And then I saw it, for the first time, clearly and undeniably. It was a silhouette moving in the shadows beyond Emily. A small figure with hair that extended beyond its body like a living veil. The hair moved as if it were in water, even though we were on dry land. And when the head tilted, I saw 2 points of light where its eyes should have been. Yellow. Not bright like reflected light. Yellow like rusted gold, or like coins from a past century, with no life behind them. Just vacuum dressed in yellow. The thing leaned over Emily, its hair enveloping her, and my daughter stopped her movement. She simply stood there, while the impossible touched her. I ran down the stairs so fast I almost fell. I opened the glass door so hard I almost broke it. I ran through the garden, screaming Emily's name. The figure disappeared, literally dissipated like smoke dispersing in a wind that I couldn't feel. 1 second it was there, and then it wasn't, leaving behind only the absence of itself. When I reached Emily, she was unconscious. I carried her to bed. Her body was too hot, her skin damp with sweat despite the cold night. I cleaned her up, put her in dry pajamas, and spent the entire night awake, touching her forehead, checking if she was still breathing. In the morning, she woke up with a scream that froze my blood. "Get off me!" she was shouting, batting her arms to ward off something invisible. "Go away! Go away!" I tried to hug her, but she pushed me away, her small fists hitting my shoulder. "Emily, it's me. It's just Mom," I said, and gradually she began to calm down, recognizing my voice. But it took a full hour until she stopped trembling. That afternoon, after she finally fell asleep, I brought up all the old files that were in the house. Some moving papers, a house ownership book, everything stacked in a cardboard box that the real estate agent had left behind. I went through everything looking for any information about who had owned the house before me, any clue as to why it was so cheap, any indication of what could be wrong with that place. There were 2 names on the previous property record, Anthony Silva and Rose Silva. Nothing else. No list of previous owners, no history of the property, no documentation of renovations or repairs. I opened my laptop and started searching. Silva family, Salem, Oregon. A man named Anthony Silva. Nothing at first. But then, in a digital archive of a local newspaper on the internet, the Salem Advocate from 1984, I found a small news item. Man and woman die in standoff with police. Anthony Silva, 47, and Rose Silva, 44, died Tuesday night when police responded to a domestic disturbance call at their property at My House address. According to police records, officers arrived at the scene and found conditions that suggested an unspecified ritualistic situation. The Silvas were deemed a threat and were killed in an armed confrontation. A daughter, her age concealed by sealed records, was found at the scene and placed under county care. Police refused to comment further on the incident. My heart raced as I read the news again. A daughter. The Silvas had a daughter. Emily had mentioned the name Annie, and Annie was a common nickname for a few American names. Could there have been someone named Anna here in that house 40 years ago? I looked for more. I spent hours that night, moving between different browser tabs, typing variations of names, searching newspaper archives from 1984 and the years after. I found a few more scraps of information, all fragmented, all raising more questions. Juvenile placed with relatives in Multnomah County. Death investigation closed. Police acted in self-defense. Empty home remains mark of local infamy. There was something in every news item, a sense that the complete truth was being guarded behind careful words and silences. The word ritualistic appeared in 2 of the articles, but it was never elaborated upon. As if the journalists had reached a certain point and decided not to ask further, or had been directed not to go any further. I found a mention in a local crime blog from 2011, one of Salem's most disturbing cases that was essentially forgotten. The blogger had written a 50-paragraph post speculating on what the ritualistic situation might have been. There were mentions of possible satanic cults, child abuse, possible drug involvement. But nothing was confirmed. It was all speculation. It was like looking at the outline of something in the dark. You could feel the general shape, but you could never fully focus. I kept looking for hours. My eyes were starting to get heavy, but I couldn't stop. There was something there waiting to be found. I could feel it. Then I found it. In an archive of municipal records from 1984, there was a document titled Preliminary Statement, Unnatural Death Investigation. It didn't have the full content, just a summary. The death of Anthony Silva, 47, and Rose Silva, 44, was determined to be justifiable homicide by law enforcement officers on September 8, 1984. The circumstances involved the response to a domestic disturbance call at the My Address property. Upon arrival, officers found the Silva's daughter, Anna Silva, 8 years old, in a state of apparent neglect, showing signs of severe trauma. There was evidence that a ritual or ceremony was underway at the time of the officers' arrival. The ritual involved a deactivated pool, symbols marked on the concrete, and instrumentation that suggested the intent of a violent act. The parents were considered an imminent threat and killed in a confrontation. The daughter was transferred to state protection. Anna Silva was 8 years old when her parents were killed. 8 years old. Emily was 8 years old. My fingers trembled as I clicked through the screen. I searched for Anna Silva later in the records. I searched for Anna Silva, Oregon. I searched for Anna Silva death. I searched for anything that could tell me what had happened to the girl whose parents had offered her to something at the bottom of that pool. Nothing. No death record. No adoption record. No news about where she went. It was as if Anna Silva had disappeared from history exactly at the point where it mattered most to know. It was getting light when I heard Emily scream. It was a different scream from the previous ones. It wasn't terror. It was pain. Genuine pain, tearing through the house like a wire of glass. I ran to her room and found her in bed, her eyes wide open, her small fingers tearing at the skin of her own arm. There was blood under her fingernails. "Emily! Emily, stop!" I shouted, gently but firmly grabbing her wrists. "She's inside me." Emily was crying, her eyes completely white. "She's inside and she wants to get out. She wants to get out. Mom. She hurts. She hurts so much. Calm down. Calm down, honey. No one is inside you. It's just a nightmare." "It's not a nightmare." her body arched as if someone were pulling her from under the skin. She whispered to me. She said she's trapped, and that if I don't let her out, she's going to explode me from the inside out. I took her to the bathroom and put her in warm water, cleaning the blood from her arms. The bruises that covered her body now had a pattern. They weren't random. They were all concentrated in one spot, on her chest, over her heart, as if something was trying to dig its way in. That morning, I took Emily straight to the emergency room. The doctor who attended her, a man named Dr. Reeves, a name coincidence that seemed bitterly appropriate to me, performed a series of tests. X-ray, echocardiogram, MRI, all came back normal. Her heart is functioning perfectly, he said, showing me the images on his screen. She has nothing physically abnormal, but psychologically, he hesitated, choosing his words. There has been an increase in references to her in school and protective services reports. You were both investigated for suspected abuse. It was dismissed, I said, my voice empty. Yes, I understand, but that doesn't mean there isn't something going on here that requires professional intervention. I'd like to refer her to a child psychiatrist. It's possible she is experiencing dissociation, or possibly developing a psychotic condition. My daughter is not hallucinating, I said, but the words came out weak. Perhaps not, but something is causing these episodes of self-harm, and the psychological component cannot be ignored. I agreed to the consultation, but I didn't believe a psychiatrist could help, because the problem wasn't in Emily's mind. The problem was that there was something inside my house, something that had been bound and imprisoned for 40 years, and had finally found a way to communicate. That night, for the first time, I decided to face it directly. After Emily fell asleep, I went downstairs and out to the empty pool. I took a flashlight, letting it illuminate the path through the dark garden. The night was strangely calm. No sound of insects, no sound of wind, just absolute silence, as if the whole world was holding its breath. I approached the edge of the pool. The smell was terribly strong up close, that aroma of putrefaction and mold that I had noticed before. I shined the flashlight to the bottom, and what I saw almost made me fall backward. There were symbols marked on the cracked concrete bottom. It wasn't obvious at first glance. It was all faded, almost absorbed by the dirt and mud of the years. But when you knew to look, it was there. A kind of complex circle with lines that extended outward in patterns that made my eyes hurt when I tried to trace them. A ritual symbol. I descended to the bottom of the pool, my bare feet landing in the crack pattern that radiated from the symbol like spiderwebs. The mud was viscous, sticky, thicker than it should be. "I know you're here," I said out loud. It was ridiculous to do that. Seemed absurd. But I was far beyond the point of appearing absurd. "I know you're real. I know you have my daughter." The air grew colder. Not just colder. It was as if the temperature simply dropped in a way that wasn't natural. As if someone had opened a door to a place much, much colder. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why are you hurting her?" I was answered by silence, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was a silence that contained presence, like the silence of a crowd holding its breath in a theater. "What do you want?" I asked. And then, as if the answer was being pulled through some viscous and resistant medium, I heard a voice. Not with my ears, with my mind. Several voices actually, superimposed on each other, each whispering in slightly different tones. If you could make a chorus of people who died a long time ago and then ask them to speak simultaneously through a mouth that wasn't made for their form, that's what it would sound like. "I am trapped," the voice said. "Bound. Bound in flesh I cannot leave. Bound in an agreement that was never fulfilled. You are." My voice failed. "You are the thing they invoked? What the Silvas? What their parents tried to do? Invoked? No. Called. Promised. Offered a child for a price. The price was gold. A lot of gold. They wanted wealth and power. They brought me here. They set the symbol. Opened the door. And when the door opened, they pushed me inside that girl. Inside Anna. Why? Because a host must be innocent. A child. A child offered of free will. Well, not of free will. offered by those who had the right to offer. A child is the best currency. Their dreams are sweeter. Their hope is more nourishing. And when the host finally breaks, the entity inside remains a prisoner, and the agreement is incomplete. My stomach turned. The police killed her parents before they could complete the ritual, before the sale of souls could be concluded. And I stayed here, inside Anna, waiting. Waiting for what? Another host. Someone to offer the same agreement again. Someone with enough hope to sustain a true transformation. Your daughter has so much hope, so much light, so much life not lived yet. She is exactly what I need. I felt my whole body tremble with fury and terror. You won't have her, I said, and my voice sounded firm, even though I was falling apart inside. I already have her, the voice replied. She is starting to dissolve. Have you noticed how she is getting weaker, paler? Soon, there will be enough space for me to leave Anna and enter Emily completely. When that happens, the agreement will be fulfilled. I will be free. How? I asked. How do I stop you? You can't, the voice whispered. But she can. The mother can. If you accept the agreement. If you sign the pact in your own blood, legitimizing the sacrifice that should have happened 40 years ago, then the transfer will be concluded. Emily will be freed. And I will be free. And me, you will be the host. The mother instead of the daughter. It's fair, isn't it? A negotiation. Your body and your soul in exchange for your daughter's life. I left the pool that night without answering. My feet, my thoughts, my heart. Everything was numb, because I already knew what my answer would be. I had always known what it would be. From the moment I saw that figure bent over my daughter, its hair wrapping around her like chains, I had known. I would accept. I would always accept. Because what is a mother but the sum total of her sacrifices? And what sacrifice is not worth it for the life of your child? The next few days were marked by the illusion of normality. I took Emily to school, pretended everything was fine, pretended my daughter wasn't slowly dissolving, pretended I hadn't mentally signed my life away to a nameless entity in an empty pool. But at night, things got worse. Emily barely ate. She slept most of the time, but her sleep wasn't restful. She would groan and move restlessly, her body covered in sweat even when the house was cold. The bruises multiplied. There were now marks on her neck, on her forehead, on her small fingers, as if something was trying to write itself all over her skin. And there were changes in her expression. Moments where I would look at her and for a fraction of a second, her eyes had a different quality. Older, emptier, as if something very ancient was looking out through them. That Saturday morning, I found her sitting alone on the back porch, staring at nothing. "Emily?" I asked softly. She didn't answer immediately. Then she turned to me with an expression that wasn't entirely hers. "She wants me to say something?" Emily whispered, her voice slightly different, slightly delayed, as if someone was pulling the words through a mouth that wasn't made for them. "She wants you to know that tonight is the time when you need to come to the pool and fulfill the agreement." "How do you know that?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "Because she's here," Emily said, and pointed to an empty spot next to her. "She's always here now." I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. I could feel the cold radiating from that empty spot in the air. "Tell her I'm coming," I said. That night, after I put Emily to bed and waited until she fell asleep, I went down to the pool for the last time as Clara Reeves, the woman I had been. I took a kitchen knife. Not to defend myself, I knew it would be useless. But for me, for what was coming next. The symbol at the bottom of the pool glowed faintly when I looked down, as if it were absorbing light instead of reflecting it. I tore my right palm, letting the blood drip onto the symbol. The air around me began to move, not like wind, more as if space itself was being folded, as if reality were a cloth and something very large was pulling from underneath. "I accept," I said out loud, the words echoing in my own ears as if spoken by someone else. "I accept the agreement. I sign my blood. I offer my soul in exchange for Emily's life. Let her go. Let my daughter go." The darkness coagulated around me. It was like being inside a black cloud that pulsed with a malevolent intelligence of its own. I felt it moving, feeling me, tasting me through the atmosphere. "Do you understand what is happening?" The voice whispered, now very close, very inside. "Yes," I replied. "You will become my vessel. Your body will be my mobile prison. You will live, but it won't be you who lives. You will be an observer inside your own flesh, watching as I use your arms and your hands for things that will make you wish you were dead." "I understand. And do you still accept?" And there was no choice. There had never been a choice. From the moment I saw my daughter, from the moment she entered my body and was born for the first time, I had known that one day I might have to pay any price to save her. "Yes," I said. "I accept." The world exploded into black. There is no adequate description for what comes next. There is no language in any human tongue for the sensation of your mind being split into two consciousnesses, one superimposed on the other. It was like being in two places at once, seeing through two pairs of eyes, having your thoughts interrupted by thoughts that weren't yours. I could feel it inside me. I could feel its shape, its size, its weight. It was much bigger than it should fit. It was like trying to put an ocean inside a teacup. But somehow it worked. Somehow the physics of that thing and the physics of my body managed to find a terrible compromise. When I regained full consciousness, I was lying at the bottom of the pool, my body immobile, my eyes open. But it wasn't me controlling my body. I was trapped inside, observing. I stood up in a movement that wasn't mine, my limbs obeying a will that wasn't mine. I climbed out of the pool and walked back to the house. Inside me, I could feel the demons settling in. It was like feeling someone move into your house, opening the cabinets, touching your belongings, making the space theirs. When I reached Emily's room, my daughter woke up as if she had been pulled from consciousness by an invisible thread. And when she looked at me, her eyes widened, because she saw. Somehow, she could feel what had happened. She could see through that flesh she had called Mom all her life and see the darkness now settled in command. "Emily," the voice that came out of my mouth wasn't mine. It was the demon's voice using my larynx, my lungs, my body as an instrument. "You are saved. The agreement is fulfilled. You will live a long life. You will have a happy life. This is the extent of my benevolence." Tears began to stream down my daughter's face. "Mom," she whispered, and it was then that I felt it. Even trapped, even divided, even observing from inside my own prison of flesh, I felt the last remnant of my will emerge. I raised my hand, his hand, who knew anymore, and touched my daughter's forehead. "Mom loves you," I managed to whisper through the voice that wasn't mine, forcing each word through the demon's will. "Mom loves you, and she always will." It was only a moment, a second where the two consciousnesses inside my body aligned just enough for me to attempt a genuinely personal action. And then the demon took over again, and I was pulled down inside into the silence. But in that second, I could see in Emily's eyes that she understood, that she knew what her mother had done, that she knew I still loved her even now. Even now, what follows is where the story should end. But it didn't, because genuine horror stories don't end with resolution or salvation. They end with the understanding that the price will still be collected, and that sometimes the worst things are waiting not at the beginning of your journey, but at the end of it when you think you're safe. In the days following that night, the thing inside me cared for Emily with a tenderness that was unsettling in its precision. Because a thing that had spent 40 years trapped knew the exact value of freedom. And it knew that if it wanted to maintain that freedom, it needed to keep the agreement. It needed to keep Emily alive and healthy and happy. My daughter recovered. Her bruises disappeared. Her dark circles vanished. She went back to school and gradually remade herself into a normal child, or as close to normal as was possible for a child who had seen what she had seen, who had experienced what she had experienced. Her teachers noticed the improvement. The social workers noticed the improvement. Margaret, the social worker, visited and declared herself satisfied with the conditions. "It seems that you and your daughter are both in a better place mentally," she said, consulting her clipboard. I just smiled. It was a smile my face made while my mind watched from inside the flesh, screaming silently. Because the worst part wasn't the loss of control. It wasn't the feeling of being a prisoner in my own body. The worst part was realizing that the demon wasn't just a monster. It was also keeping an agreement. And while Emily slept soundly at night, free from nightmares, free from visits from the thing that previously tormented her, I was awake inside the flesh, forced to watch as the demon used my body in ways that made me wish I could just die. It didn't stop eating the food I prepared. It didn't stop cleaning the house. It didn't stop taking Emily to school and smiling at her teachers. Because an agreement once made was an agreement, and even demons respect the law of their own curses. But at night, when Emily was asleep, it would go out and do things. Things I could feel through my own senses, but couldn't prevent. Things that left stains on my clothes that I had to clean in the morning, pretending to my daughter that it was just paint or coffee. My body began to change. My hair started to fall out. My skin became dry and cracked. My teeth started to loosen, because the demon wasn't meant to inhabit human flesh for so long. It was slowly destroying its host from the inside out. 6 months after that night in the pool, there was a hole in my cheek big enough that you could see my teeth through it. A year later, I was basically a walking corpse that had developed an extraordinary capacity for makeup and baggy clothes. And no doctor could explain it. "It's rare," a dermatologist said when I finally forced my body to go to an appointment. "But there are diseases that cause accelerated tissue degeneration, accelerated progeria, accelerated aging syndrome. Would you mind having a biopsy?" "No," the demon replied through my mouth. "A biopsy is not necessary," because it knew. It knew that no disease could explain it. It knew that what was happening was simply the price of its freedom being collected. A human body that couldn't sustain two consciousnesses for an indefinite period. A host that was slowly being consumed from the inside out. 6 more months and I would be a complete corpse. An empty shell that it could discard and find a new host. And it had already chosen one. I felt it during the winter in the 2nd year of the curse. There was a girl who lived a few houses down from us. She was about 10 years old. She had hope in her eyes. She had unlived life waiting to be consumed. The demon started leaving gifts on her doorstep. An old doll it found at a yard sale. Candy. Small things. Things to attract a child. And one night, as I watched from inside my own skull, helpless, it walked to the empty pool. Because somehow, the girl had disappeared from her house and had come here, awake or asleep. I didn't know. And there was a new shape of shadow waiting at the bottom. Emily found out. She had woken up early one morning and noticed I wasn't in bed. She followed my footsteps to the pool and saw the demon trying to do to the other girl what it had done to me. And in that moment, when Emily ran to the bottom of the pool screaming, her small voice echoing through the dawn, I felt something change inside me. Because there was an agreement. And agreements have two sides. When Emily threw herself into the other girl's arms to push her away from the demon, Emily was invoking her own agreement. Because she had been saved. She had lived. And now, in that moment when another child's life was in danger, her part of the pact demanded that she act. The demon roared, a sound that rattled the window panes of the house, a sound that froze the air around me, because it understood. It understood that it had been tricked. That 40 years ago, the Silvas hadn't just summoned a demon to kill their daughter. They had summoned something that should have been bound by the life of one child, but should have been freed only by the deliberate death of another child under the same circumstances. A pact that could not be finalized without completing the cycle. And Emily, my sweet daughter Emily, had inadvertently become a guardian of the curse. A protector who had power over the thing that had tortured her. "You can go," she whispered to the demon, her small body glowing with a light that wasn't light, but something older and deeper. "You can go, or you can stay here until the end of time in that woman's carcass. Choose." And in that moment, I felt the demon inside me writhe with desire, with fury, with the frustration of knowing that it had been trapped from the beginning. But I also felt something else. I felt relief, because any prison ultimately was better than eternity waiting to be freed. The demon left my body, not gradually, not in pieces, simply left, as if all that dense, heavy form that had inhabited my skull for 2 years had dissipated into black smoke that was sucked down into the pool, to the symbol that shone one last time before darkening forever. I fell to my knees on the cold pool floor, and for the first time in 2 years, the thoughts in my head were only mine. I got up slowly, my body weak and broken, my bones fragile as glass. I climbed out of the pool and saw Emily standing with the other girl, both looking at me with expressions I couldn't decode, because I was no longer the mother she knew. I was a corpse in the guise of a woman. My hair had fallen out in clumps. My skin hung in sheets from my face. There were holes in my flesh that showed bone underneath. "Mom," Emily whispered, and her voice broke. "Honey," I managed to say, my voice raspy as sandpaper. "Honey, you're safe. You're okay. You won." But she wasn't celebrating. She was just looking at me with tear-filled eyes, because she had understood exactly what her agreement had cost her. The other girl ran back to her house. Emily stayed with me as I slowly, very slowly, climbed back up to the house. What follows is just the epilogue, the final detail that transforms a horror story into something even more disturbing. Because true horror stories don't end with justice or resolution. They end with the understanding that the price will always be greater than you thought, and that salvation is just another word for slavery with a different agreement. 3 weeks later, Emily was back in school. She was 8 years and 3 weeks old when she signed her first agreement. Now she was 10, and she had aged as much as any child should age in 2 years, but in a different way. With knowledge. With the understanding that the world contained things that no one should know. I stayed in the pool most of the time, actually, because my body, once freed from the demon, found it had no particular reason to remain animated. My heart still beat, my lungs still breathed, but it was like being inside a machine that had been forgotten and continued running only by inertia. Emily fed me. She brought food to the pool, sat with me, and tried to make conversation as if her mother hadn't become a half-alive entity in decomposition. They were unilateral conversations mostly. I didn't have much to say. What do you say to your daughter that you condemned to a lifetime of responsibility that should have only been a temporary nightmare? The schools called. The social services called again. A new social worker showed up, a younger woman named Jennifer, with well-intentioned eyes that quickly became the eyes of someone who had seen too much. She found me in the room as I tried to dress in clothes that didn't fall off me as if they were too big. "Mrs. Reeves," she said, her voice careful. "We're going to need to discuss some care options. Your current state." She searched for words. "It's not safe for your daughter to be alone." "It's okay," I murmured. "It clearly is not. You need specialized medical care. You need." "She took care of me when I needed to be taken care of," I interrupted. "Now it's my turn." Jennifer blinked. "You're saying your daughter was taking care of you? A 10-year-old child?" "Yes. That is child neglect. That is emotional abuse. Mrs. Reeves, I'm going to need to report this to Child Protective Services." Again, I didn't argue. What was the point? What was the point of anything at this stage? Emily was again removed from my care. This time, it was to a foster home in Portland with a family called Chun. I could see the pain on her face as the social workers put her in the car. But it wasn't surprise. It was just acceptance. She had learned that the whole world was just a series of agreements that you didn't even know you had signed. I was placed in a nursing home, a place called Shady Pines, which was everything the name suggested. Shaded, covered in pines, and full of death that only moved slowly. The doctors were baffled by me. There was nothing wrong with me that they could diagnose and treat. It was as if my body had aged 50 years in two, but there was no disease that could explain it. They ran more tests, requested consultations with specialists. A doctor whispered the word progeria, while thinking I couldn't hear him, but I knew the truth. My body was just the physical manifestation of a spirit that had been broken in two and had never been entirely put back together. I was a woman who had been divided between two consciousnesses and had never entirely solidified again. Emily visited me on weekends. The Chens were good people, kind. They allowed her to come. She would sit by my bed in room 307, a room with 2 beds even though I was the only resident, and talk about school and her friends and pretend that her mother wasn't a wreck that was slowly rotting in white hospital linen. "How are you, Mom?" she would ask, holding my delicate, fragile hand like a bird. "I'm fine, honey," I would lie. "I'm doing well." The truth was that I wasn't doing well. The truth was that every day was a fight against gravity, against the desire to simply let my heart stop beating, because there was a part of me that hadn't managed to escape, a part of me that was still trapped in that empty pool, watching as my body walked around, doing the things that demons do. There was a rope of guilt that connected everything, pulled me down. 2 years later, Emily visited me with news. She was 12 years old by this time and had grown into a strangely old version of herself. There was a quality in her eyes that shouldn't be in a child, as if there was something watching from inside her, something that had woken up that night at the pool and had never slept again. "The Chens are adopting me," she said, sitting in the chair next to my bed. "They asked if I wanted to, and I said yes. They're good people, Mom." "I'm happy to hear that," I said, and it was true. I was happy. Happiness was just another small, fragile thing that I could hold sometimes, before letting it drop again. "And there's something else," Emily continued, and her voice became quieter. "About the house." "What house?" I asked, even though I knew. "Our house. The house in Salem. The house with the pool." She paused. "They sold it." I raised myself slightly, using my elbows for support. That was all I could do. "Sold it?" "Yes, to a family called Morrison. They have 2 daughters. I think." Emily hesitated, her face growing pale under the fluorescent light of the nursing home room. "I think you should know that the pool is still there. It's still empty." My heart started beating faster. "Emily, the symbol. Gone," she said. "The symbol at the bottom of the pool. It disappeared when that thing left you. But the place still exists. The pool still exists. And," she took a deep breath, "I can feel it." "Feel what?" "That something new is growing there. Something that is starting. As if the soil had been prepared and now the seeds are germinating." I felt the whole weight of that descend upon me. "Emily, you need to warn that family. You need to." "Warn who, Mom?" "Warn that there's a demon in their empty pool? That forgotten gods are again sleeping beneath the concrete? Would you believe me? Would they believe me? Or would they say I'm just a traumatized child who needs psychological help?" She was right. Of course she was. Because that was the nature of true horror. It was that there was no one to tell. There was no authority to appeal to. There was only the knowledge that the cycle would continue, and that soon, another mother would discover a daughter waking up at night. Another mother would see bruises appear inexplicably. Another mother would be standing in an empty pool under the moonlight, making a deal that would destroy her. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know yet," Emily replied, "but I'll figure it out. Because now, you see, I'm the guardian too. It's not something I chose. It's just what happened. And this will be my life now. Watching, waiting, interfering when I can. But most of the time, just allowing the horror to continue, because that's how it works. That's how it has always worked." She leaned forward and kissed my forehead. It was a goodbye kiss, I realized. Not because she wouldn't visit me again, but because something had changed between us in that moment. She had become the adult. I had become the child. "I love you, Mom," she said. "That will never change. But I'm also a little scared of you now. I'm scared of what you might have started." After she left, I stayed awake all night, thinking about everything. Thinking about the Silvas in 1984 opening a door to something that should never have been opened. Thinking about Anna, a child offered, locked for 40 years in a body of shadow. Thinking about my daughter, a traumatized child who had become an unchosen guardian. Thinking about the Morrison family, in our old house, sleeping under a roof that rested upon a curse so old that no one remembered how it had started anymore. And thinking about how that pool, that symbol, that agreement never truly died. It just slept. It just waited for a new host, a new sacrifice, Another mother who loved her child enough to sign her own soul away. My last 2 years at the nursing home were an exercise in disappearance. My body continued its process of gradual decomposition. More holes appeared. My fingernails fell out. My hair disappeared completely. The doctors ran more tests. A young resident named Dr. Patel suggested accelerated dementia. A nurse whispered about Creutzfeldt-Jakob. No one ever got close to the truth because the truth was too impossible, so beyond medical comprehension that it simply wasn't a possible diagnosis. I was discharged from the nursing home once for a medical appointment. I was in a wheelchair because I had lost the ability to walk. The ambulance driver, a man named Frank, put me in the vehicle and began driving through Salem on a spring day that seemed completely indifferent to the fact that he was transporting a walking corpse. We passed by my old house. I didn't ask to drive past there. Frank just took that route, talking about how traffic was better this time of day. But when we passed, I lifted my head and looked through the window. The empty pool was still visible through the branches of the fallen fence. And when I looked, for a moment, just a moment, I swear I could see a shadow form moving near its bottom. Something with long hair that moved like seaweed. Something with yellow eyes that shone like ancient coins. It wasn't Anna. There was something different now. Something that had grown from the seeds that Emily had felt germinating. Frank turned onto the next street, and the view was blocked. But that moment was enough. It was enough to tell me that I was right, that the cycle continued, that somewhere in that house, somewhere in that pool, something new was awakening, something that was hungry again. A week later, I read a news item online. I was using the computer provided to patients at the nursing home to correspond with Emily via email because in-person visits had started to be too difficult. I was too visually disturbing now, and she was too young to regularly deal with her mother's deterioration. I was checking my emails when I saw an article in the local news feed of the Salem Advocate. 8-year-old girl missing from Salem home. An 8-year-old girl, Mary Morrison, disappeared from her home on the night of April 15th. The police are asking for information from anyone who may have seen the girl. She was last seen in her room at night. In the morning, her bed was empty. Her parents report that she had been behaving strangely in recent months, waking up tired, with unexplained contusions on her body. I looked at the photo. A small girl, 8 years old, with brown hair and sweet eyes. She was smiling at the camera in a school photo, unaware that she had just started a path that would lead her to an agreement that would destroy her and free something that should have remained trapped. I sent an email to Emily. Just a link. Just, did you see? Her answer arrived minutes later. A single line. Yes, I can feel her. Lara is waking up. The thing is moving. It will soon be complete. I will do what I can. I promise. Signed, your daughter who loves you, but who can't save you from anything now. 5 months later, I received an unexpected visit. It wasn't Emily. It was a woman I had never seen before, but whose eyes I instantly recognized. They were the eyes of someone who had made a deal. The eyes of someone who knew exactly the price she was about to pay. Her name was Sarah Morrison. She was Mary's mother. "You are Mrs. Reeves," she said, sitting in the chair next to my bed. It wasn't a question. "You lived in the house. Your daughter found me. She told me about the agreement. She told me you would know what to do." I tried to sit up, but my body didn't obey very well anymore. All I could do was turn my head to face her. "Emily shouldn't have told," I said, my voice now hissing like air escaping from a broken bellows. "She said I needed to understand what was coming, so that I could make an informed choice." Sarah's eyes were full of tears, but her voice was firm. "My daughter is missing. The police can't find her. The doctors can't explain the bruises that appeared before she disappeared. But your daughter," she felt that Mary wasn't dead, that she was just trapped, that there was something holding her. "Emily shouldn't have gotten involved," I repeated. "Maybe not, but she did. She explained everything to me. About you, about the pool, about the agreement you made. And she told me that you were the only person alive who truly knew what it meant. That you were the only person who could tell me if it was worth it. If sacrificing everything, your sanity, your body, your soul, to save your child, if that was worth it. I looked at this woman for a long time. I looked at the hope on her face, the despair, the absolute love that she was willing to sacrifice everything for. No, I finally said. It's not worth it. Nothing is worth it. She blinked. Tears started to stream down her face. Then what do I do? She whispered. You let go, I said. You let your daughter go. You allow the demon to consume her and use her as a host. You leave that house. You try to have another daughter. You try to live a life where you don't carry the guilt of having condemned your own soul to save a child. You're telling me to renounce her? I'm telling you not to do what I did, because this is where you end up. I gestured around the empty room, to my decomposing body, to the carcass of a woman who had been consumed from the inside out by her own compassion. Here, alone, rotting, unable to save anyone, unable to do anything but lie in bed and watch as your love fails again and again. Sarah stood up. She was trembling. Are you asking me to choose my own life over hers? I'm telling you that both are lost now. The only one you can save is the future version of you that hasn't been consumed by this yet. Go. Take your husband. Take any other children you might have. Go very far from that house. Very far from that pool. Because if you stay, if you try to save Mary the way Emily expects you to, then welcome to my life. Welcome to the slow death that is being trapped inside your own body while something else drives you. She left the room without answering. I heard her footsteps in the hallway, fast, as if she were running. 3 days later, I read another news item on the computer. Family sells Salem property, moves to California. The Morrisons, from the property at my old address, sold their house this Monday for a significantly reduced price. The family made no comments on the reason for the quick sale, but neighbors reported that the move happened very quickly. There was no mention of Mary. There was just silence about what had happened to the daughter. If she had remained in the pool, if she had become a new host, if she was now trapped, watching from inside her own skull while something very ancient utilized her body. Emily visited me a week later. She was 16 now, a teenager with the eyes of a 40-year-old woman. She sat next to my bed and held my hand. You know what the Morrisons did, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Do you think it was wrong? I thought about the question for a long time. I don't know, I finally said. I think it was the kindest choice they could have made. To save one daughter and condemn another, which is the more moral choice? There is no right answer. There are just choices, and all of them destroy someone. The house was sold again, Emily said. This time to a family called Park. They have a daughter. She's 8 years old. My heart started beating faster. Emily, you need to warn. I already did, she interrupted. I found the mother. I told her everything, even about you. She thought it was crazy. The police were called. There was an uncomfortable conversation with a nurse about whether you were disseminating conspiracy theories to vulnerable families. Ultimately, they simply believe you're a sick woman in a nursing home who has delusions about dark things. So you can't do anything, I whispered. No, I can't do anything, because that's how it works, Mom. That's how it has always worked. The horror cannot be stopped, can only be postponed. It can only be displaced from one child to another, from one mother to another. It's an agreement the world made long before we were born, and it will continue long after we die. She leaned forward and kissed my forehead again. I love you, she said, but I'm also starting to understand why you're ready to leave. I was discharged from the nursing home in the spring, not because I had gotten better, but because I had reached a point where the nursing home couldn't do any more for me, and keeping me there was a waste of resources. They were kind about it. Dr. Patel offered me palliative care at home. Hospice, as it's called in medical jargon. A more delicate way of saying, you're going to die soon and we want you to be comfortable. Emily had finally convinced the Chens to allow me to live with them. It wasn't easy. It wasn't convenient. But they were good people, and Emily was their daughter now, or almost daughter. It hadn't been legally finalized, but it was close. And there was a quality to her insistence that they couldn't refuse. So there I was, in a hospital bed in the room next to Emily in a house in Portland. A 43-year-old woman who looked 108. An empty shell that the world had forgotten to remove. Emily visited me at night. She would sit next to my bed and read to me. Fantasy stories mostly. Worlds where there were heroes who could defeat monsters. Worlds where sacrifice meant something. "How are you today, Mom?" she would ask, squeezing my hand. Well, I would always lie. "I'm well." "Liar," she would smile. "But I appreciate the effort." 3 weeks after coming to Portland, I received a visit from someone who wasn't Emily. It was a girl. She might have been 18. She had deep-set eyes that had seen too much. And when I looked into those eyes, I understood who she was. "Hello, Clara," she said, sitting in the chair next to my bed. "My name is Anna." "Well, not exactly. My name was Anna once. Now it's complicated." My whole body froze. "You?" I whispered. "Yes, me," she confirmed. "The child whose parents offered her to a demon in 1984. The thing that spent 40 years trapped inside a body that was too small to contain it. The entity that you waved out of you to save your daughter." "The demon disappeared," I said, although my voice was trembling. "Emily forced it out. It left." "It did," Anna agreed. "But I didn't. I stay. Because, you see, there's a big difference between a demon and the child the demon inhabited. One is an entity. The other is a person who has been transformed by trauma beyond human understanding. One is a curse. The other is just a girl who grew up very wrong under very bad circumstances." She leaned forward. "I've been watching your daughter, Clara, for several years now, watching how she carries the knowledge she has, how she tries to interfere when she can, how she feels responsible for the horror that keeps happening. And I understood something." "What?" I asked. "That there is a pattern, a cycle, a chain of mothers and daughters, each trying to save the other, each being consumed in a different way. Your parents tried to sacrifice me to gain wealth. They failed, but the demon stayed. You sacrificed yourself to move me away from your daughter. And your daughter is now condemned to spend the rest of her life watching other children be consumed by the same demon, unable to completely stop it because the system is too big, the curse is too old, and there are always more people willing to make desperate deals." "Why are you here, Anna?" I asked. "Because," she said, "I'm tired of watching. I'm tired of being just another victim in this cycle. And I think you're tired too." She placed a hand on my forehead. "You know there's a way out, don't you? There's a way to break the cycle." "How?" I whispered. "You go back. You go back to the pool. You go to the symbol that is still there, the symbol that disappeared from view but still exists on another plane. And you destroy it. But to destroy it, you need a living host. You need a body that is capable of containing the energy of the ritual while you dismantle it. You need someone who understands what is happening. You need me." I closed my eyes. "If you do that, Anna, you will die. The ritual will consume you." "Maybe," she agreed. "Or maybe there's something waiting on the other side of the ritual that is better than being here, trapped between being alive and being dead, watching as the same pain happens again and again." "And my daughter?" "Your daughter will be free. For the first time since that night at the pool, she will be truly free. No curse hanging over her. No guardian responsibility. She will be able to live a normal life, Clara. She will be able to be young and make mistakes and grow up and love without always having to watch out for horror." Took a week of silent preparation, a week of Emily saying goodbye to the world in ways that she hoped her Chin parents wouldn't notice. A week of helping me out of bed, helping me put on clothes, helping me stand up long enough so that we could make the journey back to that cursed house in Salem. It wasn't easy. My body was almost completely incapable of moving. But intention is a powerful thing, and when you intend to die in a specific place, the universe has a way of cooperating. Anna met us there. She and Emily hugged on the way to the pool. It was the first time the two had seen each other since that night, years ago, when one had vanquished the other. "Thank you," Emily said to Anna. "For what?" asked Anna. "For being willing to do this. for being willing to sacrifice yourself to save my mother from the life she is living, for being braver than I am." Anna smiled, and there was a peace in that smile that I hadn't seen in any child in my whole life. "I'm not braver, just tired. There's a difference." We descended to the bottom of the empty pool, and the symbol was there, the symbol that had disappeared from view, but which had always been here, invisible on another plane. A complex circle that contained shapes and patterns that made my eyes hurt when I tried to focus on them. Anna lay down in the center of the symbol. "Do you know what to do?" she asked me. "Yes," I lied. "It's okay if you don't. We'll figure it out together." I placed my trembling hands on the symbol, and I began to tear, not with my hands, with my will, with all the intention that was left in my body, all the moments I had spent observing from inside my own flesh, all the pain I had endured, all the guilt I had carried. I tore it to pieces, and as I tore, I felt the curse respond. I felt it squirm, writhe, try to remain trapped in that place where it had lived for so many years. Anna began to glow, literally began to emit light, a golden light that grew brighter as the curse flowed through her, as the ritual dismantled itself, as the pattern that had been interwoven 41 years ago finally began to unravel. "I love her," Emily whispered, holding my hand. "I love her too," I whispered back to my daughter, and then everything went white. There is no description for what comes next, because if there is an after, it's not for the living world. All I can tell you is that it doesn't hurt anymore, that there is a sense of lightness that I had forgotten what it was like, that there are familiar voices that I recognize, voices of people I loved that I had lost a long time ago, and that where I am now there is a window, and through that window I can see Emily climbing out of the pool. I can see her turn and look back, and for a moment, just a moment, I see her eyes shine with Anna's golden color. It's not possession, it's gratitude, this shared understanding. Then she turns and walks back to a life without a curse, to a life she never had, to a life that is, finally and truly, hers. 30 years later, Emily Park, it's not her real name, but it's the name she chose for herself when she finally escaped from being the girl from Salem, is a literature professor at a private college in Portland. She is brilliant. Her students adore her. She writes about trauma and recovery and stories that explore the dark spaces of the human condition. She never married. The Chens asked why, and she said it was just the way things worked out, which was true, but it wasn't the complete truth. The complete truth was that she never allowed herself to forget, that she visited certain archives, that she monitored certain houses, that there was, in her life, always a part of her that was watching, waiting, because there was a truth she had learned very young, and which had only deepened with the passing of years. The horror never truly ends. It just changes shape. The pool in Salem had been filled and covered with concrete 2 years after that final night. The house had been demolished 5 years later. No one lived on the site now, just an empty lot with trees growing around it, a place that people instinctively avoided, as if they could feel that something had happened there, as if the land was still stained by an agreement that had been broken, but not before consuming too many lives. But Emily knew it didn't matter, because the curse wasn't bound to the pool. The pool was just an entry point. A ritual is just a ritual. It's the will behind it that matters. And there was a lot of will behind that ritual. Decades of will. Generations of desperate hope and willing sacrifice. As long as there were mothers willing to make pacts to save their daughters, there would be things waiting on the other side, ready to accept the agreement. As long as there were children wronged by life, there would be demons willing to use them. The cycle would continue. Emily saw it in news reports, obscure stories about missing children, about parents who believed they were doing the right thing and then discovered they had signed their lives away, about doctors who couldn't explain strange marks, about children who woke up with knowledge they shouldn't possess. It was never from the same place. The demon that had lived in her mother was just one, and it had been destroyed that night when Anna sacrificed herself. But there were others. There were always others. There was one in Portland, she was sure. There were stories that came in fragments. a girl at a nearby school who had started drawing shadow figures, a boy who woke up screaming about things touching him at night. Emily had tried to interfere once. She had found the family. She had tried to tell them the truth. They called her crazy. Worse, they called her responsible for the traumatic events that followed, when the demon, feeling threatened, had accelerated its feeding process. Since then, Emily had learned to be more careful. She had learned that direct interference rarely worked, that the best you could do was write your stories. Teach your students to recognize patterns of trauma. Create a world where people understood that horror was real, even if they couldn't name exactly what the horror was. There was a student in her class that fall, a young man named Marcus who wrote stories about empty pools and houses that devoured the people who lived in them. Emily called him into her office after class. "Your fiction is excellent," she said, "but it's very specific. How did you conceive those details? About how a ritual works, about how a curse propagates?" Marcus looked at her for a long time. "You know," he finally said, "you really know." "Yes," Emily admitted. "I know." "Then you understand why I have to write this, why I need to tell the stories. Because if I don't tell them, no one will know. And if no one knows, then it's as if it never happened." "And you want it to have happened?" Emily asked. "No, but it did happen. It happened to me. It happened to my sister. And if I don't tell it, it's as if our lives are removed from the world. It's as if we never existed." Emily leaned back in her chair. "What is your real name?" she asked. "Park," Marcus replied. "My name is Marcus Park. My grandfather designed the pool. My father grew up watching the curse. And my sister." He took a deep breath. "My sister is the host." Emily felt her heart beat faster. "Is she still alive?" she asked. "Yes, she is kept in a private institution in Seattle. She lives, but she isn't really alive. It's like being in a prison you carry inside you. My parents used to visit her, but eventually stopped. It was too painful. Now it's just me who goes." "And you? How do you escape?" Marcus smiled, and there was a sad quality to it that was too old for his young face. Writing everything, making it real in a way that is mine, not the creatures that inhabits the pool. Stripping the secrets bare, making sure people like you know that you are not alone in the knowledge that horror is real and that it lives in places you can't see. It's my way of resisting." Emily spent the next year working with Marcus. Not to save his sister, Emily had learned that salvation was usually just another form of sacrifice, but to help him write his story, to help him transform his trauma into something that others could read and recognize. When he finally finished, Marcus looked at her with gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, "for believing that this mattered, for believing that my story deserved to be told." "It always deserves to be told," Emily replied. "It always will." 10 years later, Emily was invited to give a lecture at a university in Salem. It wasn't because she was famous. She was just a professor who had written some well-received articles on trauma narrative. But that invitation put her back in that city, back near that place. After her lecture, she asked the humanities department if she could have time to walk. She drove to the old address. The property had changed hands several times in the years since the demolition. Now it was just an empty lot with trees. She stopped at the fence and looked at the space where the pool had been. There was nothing visible there. No sign of where a ritual had been. No mark of where a girl had been offered to a demon. No memory of where a mother had signed her soul away. But Emily could feel it. She could feel that there was something still here. Not in the form of an active presence. More in the form of a scar. A place where reality had been wounded and had never completely healed. "Hello, Clara," Emily whispered to the wind. "Hello, Anna. Hello, mother who came before you. And before. And before. Did you make it? Did you find any peace?" The wind didn't answer. The wind never answered. But there was a quality to the silence that Emily had learned to interpret as a yes. She placed a hand on the fence and stood there for a long time, just feeling the place. Feeling the history that was in it. Feeling all the layers of suffering and sacrifice that composed it. And then she walked away, because there were still stories to write. There was still trauma to explore. There were still people who needed to know that they weren't alone in their knowledge that horror was real, and that it lived in dark places that you couldn't turn off with a switch. In the final years of Emily's life, she lived to be 82, sharp and intelligent until the end. She wrote a book. It wasn't fiction, although it had the quality of well-written fiction. It was an exploration of how trauma passes from generation to generation, how sacrifice generates more sacrifice, how curse is just another name for a pattern that no one can break. She called it The Girl of Shadows, a story of women who tried to save their children. When it was finally published, it became an underground bestseller. Those who read it recognized in it a truth that had not been named before, the understanding that there was a cycle of horror that permeated society, and that most people were too busy or too scared to truly face it. Some readers recognized it for exactly what it was: a warning, a story to be shared, a way to tell the world that impossible things were very possible, and that the best you could do was be prepared. Others read it as pure fiction and marveled at how creative she was. It didn't matter. The book was in the world now. The story was being told. Emily died in her sleep at 82. The Chens, who had lived long lives and loved each other, had gone well before her. She had no children. She had no husband. She only had her students and her books and the deep certainty that she had done the best she could with the knowledge that had been forced upon her. 30 years after her death, a teenager named Tyler found The Girl of Shadows in a library. He picked it up because the cover was interesting, an image of an empty pool with shadows moving at the bottom. He read it in one night, and when he finished, he understood that the story he had read was exactly his story. Or it would be his story if he hadn't read that book and understood the pattern. Because Tyler had a sister who was starting to wake up at night. Tyler had a mother who was starting to look more desperate every day. Tyler had a house that had started to feel wrong in a way he couldn't explain. And Tyler had, now, the knowledge that Emily had gained through unspeakable agony. Knowledge that there was an agreement being made, and knowledge that the best you could do was recognize the pattern before becoming a part of it. He couldn't save his sister. Emily had learned that all too well, but he could prepare himself. He could study. He could write. He could wait. And when the moment came, he would know what to do, because the horror never truly ends. But sometimes one person in a generation can choose to resist, can choose to know, can choose to pass the knowledge on. And sometimes that is enough, not to save, not to redeem, but to continue, to witness, to ensure that the story is known and told again and again, so that no one ever has to be alone in the knowledge that impossible things are very, very real.